In the small town of Maplewood, a fire took everything from Clara. One moment she was in her cozy living room, sipping hot tea, surrounded by her beloved books, and the next her world was reduced to ashes. The flickering flames danced on the horizon, swallowing her home whole. It was a late afternoon in August, and the air was thick with smoke and fear. Clara had lived in that little house for over 10 years, just a small place with white shutters and a flower garden that she nurtured every spring. It was her sanctuary. As she watched the flames spread, she felt her heart pull tighter in her chest. Panic washed over her. This was not just a house, it was her memories, her life. The sirens wailed in the distance, but they felt so far away, like they were part of someone else's story. Clara grabbed her phone, shaking as she dialed 911. "Please, hurry," she managed to whisper through her trembling lips. Despite the chaos, there was a strange clarity in those moments. She thought about her family, her friends, and the precious things she had collected over the years. Suddenly, that golden locket from her grandmother and the photo of her wedding day didn't seem so trivial. They were everything, and they were gone. As she stood there watching firefighters battle the inferno, she realized she had nowhere to go. Every place she could think of was filled with memories of her home, the laughter, the quiet nights, the warmth. She felt an emptiness that stretched deep within her. But in the midst of her despair, fate had a plan. Just a little ways down the road, there was a ranch owned by a man named Jake. He had lived in Maplewood all his life. Known for his kindness, Jake was the sort of guy who would help a stranger just because it was the right thing to do. He had heard the sirens while finishing up his chores. When he saw the thick smoke rising in the distance, his heart sank. Without wasting a moment, Jake grabbed his truck keys and drove toward the fire. As he got closer, he saw Clara standing alone, her face streaked with soot, eyes wide and lost. He parked, jumped out, and approached her gently. He asked, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Clara looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "My home, it's gone," she said, her voice cracking. Jake felt a weight in his chest. He knew the pain of losing something dear, even if not in the same way Clara had just experienced. "Come with me," he said softly, guiding her toward his truck. The offer surprised Clara. She hesitated, unsure if she should accept help from a man she barely knew. But looking back at those burning ruins, she realized she had no choice. "Thank you," she whispered, climbing into his truck, feeling a flicker of hope in the midst of despair. As they drove, Jake tried to lighten the mood, sharing stories about life on the ranch. He told her about the horses, the cows, and the peaceful evenings spent under the stars. Clara listened, feeling a warmth inside that had been missing. It was hard to believe that just hours ago, her world had been so dark. When they arrived at the ranch, Jake showed Clara to the guest room. It was simple, but it felt like a safe haven. She sat on the bed, looking around at the rustic walls adorned with pictures of horses and cattle. For the first time since the fire, she exhaled and allowed herself to feel a little relief. There was comfort in this unexpected kindness. That evening, Jake made dinner for them both. They shared a meal under the twilight sky, the stars twinkling above like diamonds. Clara found herself laughing at Jake's stories, forgetting, if only for a moment, the devastation of the day. Jake had a way of lifting her spirits, and it felt good to talk to someone who genuinely cared. Days turned into weeks, and Clara stayed at the ranch. She found herself waking up to the sound of roosters and the fresh smell of hay in the morning. Jake showed her how to care for the animals. Each small task helped her heal. She learned to ride horses, their strong bodies beneath her bringing a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. With each passing day, Clara and Jake grew closer. Their conversations deepened, and she learned so much about him, his dreams for the ranch, his love for the land, and his quiet passion for helping others. Clara shared her own hopes and dreams, revealing the parts of herself that she had kept hidden. But even in this refuge, the shadows of her past lingered. Every now and then, Clara would sit quietly, staring off into the distance, lost in thought. Jake noticed. He saw the pain behind her bright smile, the sadness in her laughter. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the fields, he sat beside her on the porch. He asked gently, his tone inviting. Clara took a deep breath, feeling vulnerable but seen. "I thought I was strong. I thought I could handle everything. But losing my home, it breaks something inside," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. Jake listened, his heart aching for her. "It's okay to feel that way. It's all right to grieve what you've lost," he said softly. As Clara shared her fears and frustrations, she felt a weight lift. Talking to Jake was freeing. She realized that she didn't have to bear this burden alone. He was not just a stranger. He was someone who wanted to understand and help her heal. Over time, the ranch became more than just a place to stay. It became a home, a new beginning. The animals became friends, their presence comforting and grounding. Clara began to reclaim her sense of self, finding joy in the simple things. She discovered that even in the ashes of her past, there was potential for rebirth. One crisp morning, Clara woke up determined. With Jake's encouragement, she decided to start a small garden next to the house. It felt symbolic, planting roots in this new life. As she dug her hands into the soil, she remembered the flowers she had once grown at her old home. In a way, she was starting anew, just like the flowers she would plant. Jake watched her with a smile. He was impressed by her strength, her resilience. Every day he saw her energy return. They worked together side by side, planting seeds of hope, and laughter filled the air around them. days turned into months. Clara's garden flourished, vibrant colors breaking through the ground. It was a reflection of her healing, beautiful and full of life. She began to dream again, not just about rebuilding her old life, but about embracing this new chapter with open arms. But as the seasons changed, Clara faced another challenge. The forest fire had shaken not only her, but the whole community. Many families were still struggling, trying to rebuild what they had lost. Clara felt a pull to help, to give back in gratitude for the kindness that Jake had shown her. "I want to do something," she said one evening, looking at Jake. Jake nodded, his eyes shining with admiration. "That's a great idea. You've got the spirit for it," he encouraged. So Clara began to plan. They transformed a corner of the ranch into a gathering place for the community. They set up tents, arranged food donations, and invited everyone for a day of fun and togetherness. Music played, children laughed, and conversations flowed freely. The ranch buzzed with life, a stark contrast to the silence of those dark days. On the day of the event, as Clara looked around at the smiling faces, she felt gratitude swell in her heart. She had built a new home, not just for herself, but for those who shared her story. The kindness of a rancher had led her back to herself, and now she could share that with others. As the sun dipped low in the sky, Clara and Jake stood side by side, watching the celebrations. "You've created something beautiful," he said, his voice warm with pride. Clara turned to him, her heart full. They met each other's eyes, and in that moment, Clara understood that sometimes life takes you through the fire to lead you to places of unexpected love and community. The loss of her home had opened new doors, revealing parts of herself she never knew existed. The bond between Clara and Jake deepened, woven together by shared experiences, healing hearts, and community spirit. Together, they faced the future, ready to embrace whatever came next, hand in hand. And through it all, the flame of resilience burned bright, illuminating the journey they both had taken, a journey of loss, love, and rebuilding on the wild and beautiful land of hope. The flames leaped higher than the trees, dancing fiercely against the darkening sky. Clara stood frozen, her heart racing wildly in her chest as she watched her home engulfed in a sea of fire. In just a few moments, the years of love and memories housed within those walls disappeared, being devoured by the hungry blaze. Smoke billowed into the sky, a dark cloud of despair looming over her small town of Maplewood. It was supposed to be a normal summer evening. Clara was in her garden, the sweet scent of blooming flowers wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. She had just finished watering her prized roses when she smelled the smoke. At first, it was a distant, faint odor, but as she turned toward her house, a horrific sight emerged. Flames flickered from her living room window, greedy and wild, as if they had been waiting for the right moment to strike. With tears streaming down her face, Clara dialed 911, her hands shaking so violently that she struggled to push the buttons. "Please hurry," she cried, desperate and breathless. The operator's calm voice was a small anchor in the storm of emotion swirling inside her. As she followed the smoke rising in billowing clouds, panic took hold. Thoughts raced through her mind. All her memories, the cherished photographs, her grandmother's old quilt, the keychain from her first car, all the pieces that pieced together her life were now moments away from being reduced to ashes. Just then she heard the sound of sirens in the distance, but the fire was relentless. Firefighters arrived, rushing in with hoses and equipment, but Clara knew the battle was lost before it began. The flames roared their victory, illuminating the night sky with a fiery glow. Standing there, Clara felt like a ghost, watching her life burn away as if she were floating above it, all disconnected from the reality around her. A small crowd began to gather, faces shadowed in worry, voices murmuring comfort, but all she could do was stare at her home, a shell of what once was. The fire raged on, and in that moment she felt utterly alone in a world full of people. The sirens screamed, but all she could hear was the crackling of the fire, the shattering of her dreams. When the flames finally died down, all that remained of Clara's beloved home was a pile of charred wood and memories. She stood there, shivering without the warmth of her home or the embrace of her memories. With nowhere to go, Clara felt the weight of despair settle on her. She took a step back, aware that she was on the edge of an abyss. It was then that she noticed Jake, a rancher from the neighboring farm, someone she had known but never really spoken to. He was a solid presence among the crowd, the kind of man who seemed to draw strength directly from the earth beneath his feet. His hat shaded his eyes, and he quickly came to her side, cutting through the fog of sadness enveloping her. "Clara," he said, his voice steady and low. Clara shook her head, unable to find the words to explain the horror of what just happened. All she could manage was a soft, anguished whisper. Before she knew it, Jake was gently guiding her away from the ruins of her home. "Come with me," he offered, his voice firm but kind. Clara hesitated, trapped between pride and her desperate need for shelter. But as she looked at the smoking remains of her life, she felt a flicker of hope. As they drove through the fading light, Jake tried to lighten the mood, sharing bits about his life on the ranch. "It's a big place, lots of room and animals everywhere," he said, his tone becoming more animated. "You'll probably love the horses." Clara listened, trying to absorb the comfort of normal conversation, though her mind was still wrapped in the chaos of the fire. Every happy moment he described felt like a distant dream, yet somehow Jake's enthusiasm began to seep into her heart. Spinning thoughts of despair turned into quiet curiosity about ranch life and what tomorrow might bring, even if just slightly. When they arrived, she was struck by the peacefulness of the ranch. Wide open spaces stretched under a canopy of stars. Animals roamed freely and the air smelled of hay and earth. Jake showed her to the guest room, a humble space filled with rustic charm. It wasn't much, but it felt safe. She sank onto the bed, feeling the exhaustion wash over her. She let out a long, shaky breath. That night, Clara stared out the window, taking in the night sky. It was incredibly clear, stars twinkling like tiny flickers of hope. Even in the shadow of despair, there was beauty, a reminder that life could still be magical. A single tear rolled down her cheek, not just for what she had lost, but for the flicker of hope that was beginning to ignite within her. Weeks passed, and Clara slowly found her footing. Jake was patient, guiding her through the rhythms of ranch life, teaching her how to care for the animals. Each morning began with the soft sound of roosters crowing, and soon she learned that life had its own comforting rhythm. Amidst the chores and the beauty of the open fields, she felt her heart begin to mend little by little. One morning they stood together in the pasture, surrounded by a group of playful horses. Clara watched as Jake leaned down, stroking the mane of a gentle mare named Daisy. He said, smiling softly. His words struck a chord deep within her. Trust. It felt like a foreign concept, fragile and elusive. She had been betrayed by fate, losing everything she held dear. Yet here was Jake, showing her another way, guiding her gently without pushing. I want to earn that kind of trust, she replied, her voice steady for the first time in ages. As days turned into weeks, Clara found herself laughing, sharing stories, and allowing the warmth of the ranch seep into her soul. With every sunrise, she felt a little stronger. The simple pleasure of a morning spent tending to the lush garden Jake had helped her start became a source of joy. Each flower that blossomed felt like a victory, a testament to new beginnings. One evening, while working in the garden, Clara paused to take in the sunset, the sky ablaze with colors that mirrored her own blooming spirit. It was during moments like these that she realized Jake was more than just a shelter from the storm. He was a light, guiding her through the darkness. One day, as Clara was harvesting vegetables, she overheard Jake talking to a neighbor about the fire and its aftermath. Clara lost everything, he said, his voice low yet firm. The weight of his words wrapped around her like a warm embrace. It was the first time she felt seen, truly seen for not just her loss, but for her strength. Empathy can weave invisible threads between people, drawing them closer. Clara's heart swelled with gratitude for Jake, for the way he saw beyond her pain. But the journey of healing isn't linear. One afternoon, a reminder of the fire hit hard, knocking the wind from her lungs. As she cleaned the guest room, she found a small, charred box buried in the back of a shelf. It contained remnants of her old life, a few photos, a silver locket. They were ashes now, little mementos of a world she once knew and loved. Overwhelmed, tears streamed down her cheeks as the memories flooded back. Jake walked in at that moment and immediately understood. He crouched down beside her, speaking softly. It's okay to feel this. With that simple act of kindness, Clara felt a veil lifted. She wasn't just healing, she was growing. Jake's patience reminded her that grief was not a sign of weakness, but an acknowledgement of the love she had lost. Together, they created a space where healing was possible, soft, gentle, and strong all at once. As months passed, Clara became more involved in the community. She began to meet neighbors, sharing stories of her own challenges and listening to theirs. With Jake beside her, they started an initiative to help families affected by the fire. A fundraiser was born out of love, a movement to spark hope among those still struggling. One crisp autumn day, Clara and Jake stood in front of the community, their faces glowing with excitement. Together we can rise from the ashes, Clara proclaimed, her heart racing with a fiery determination. The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of unity washing over them. Through the laughter and shared stories, Clara realized she was no longer just the girl who lost her home. She was part of something greater, a community that held each other up, a haven of warmth where hope could flourish. The ranch, once a refuge, had transformed into a thriving center of support and love. Every hard moment, every gentle exchange with Jake built her into someone even stronger than she had been before. When winter settled in, bringing icy winds and cold nights, Clara no longer shivered in fear or despair. Now she embraced the chill as a reminder of how far she had come. As the snow blanketed the ground, a new chapter began to unfold. Clara and Jake found themselves growing closer, the shared burdens forging a bond beyond friendship. What started as shelter evolved into something deeper, something neither of them could ignore any longer. Jake would catch Clara's eyes lingering a moment longer than necessary, and Clara found herself smiling at him for no reason at all. She asked one night, sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket, gazing at the snowflakes dancing in the moonlight. Jake shifted closer, his warm presence comforting. I believe in rebirth, he replied, his eyes searching hers. In that moment, Clara felt her heart expand, bubbles of clarity surfacing. It does, she whispered, realizing that every heartbreaking moment led her to this standing beside a man who saw her not just for her past, but for the strength she'd built along the way. As the seasons shifted, Clara stood not just as a survivor, but as a woman reborn stronger and braver than she ever knew. Side by side with Jake, they faced the world together, cultivating a new life filled with possibility. Her heart had once turned to ash, but love had found a way to bring it back to life, stronger and more radiant than before. In the end, it wasn't just about a fire taking everything away. It was about finding shelter in unexpected places and discovering that home could be rebuilt, stronger and brimming with love again. And as Clara looked around at the ranch, the community, and at Jake, she knew her journey had only just begun, a journey woven together in the tapestry of resilience, hope, and love. The crackling sound of twigs snapping underfoot was the only thing Clara heard as she stepped outside. It was a beautiful August day, the sun shining brightly over her little town of Maplewood. But even the warmth of the sun couldn't chase away the icy grip of dread that coiled in her stomach. She looked toward the hills where a plume of dark smoke spiraled ominously into the clear blue sky. Moments later, the scent of burning wood hit her like a punch to the gut. Rage flared deep inside her. Her chest tightened and she felt unmoored, her heart pounding against her ribs. No, 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 she whispered, her breath quickening. Clara had always taken pride in her little home, a quaint cottage filled with love, laughter, and memories. It was everything her grandmother had envisioned for her, a safe haven. She rushed towards the rising smoke, her pace quickening as she turned the corner and saw it, the flames licking at her living room window, devouring everything in sight. Time slowed to a crawl. How could this be happening? It felt surreal, as if she had stepped into a nightmare. In an instant, everything she held precious was quickly becoming nothing more than an inferno. Clara's phone trembled in her hands as she dialed 911. She cried, her voice shaky and desperate. She spoke, she could see the flickering flames surging higher, consuming the very fabric of her life. When the sirens blared in the distance, hope and despair surged within her like a tidal wave. But hope began to dissipate the moment she noticed the frantic look in the firefighters' eyes as they arrived. Their faces were grim. As they rushed to douse the flames, Clara felt as if she were watching spectators at a theater she was the lead in a tragic play, while everyone sold their souls to the fear of losing the show. The heat was unbearable, waves of fire licking up the walls. Even from a distance, it felt as though the flames were reaching out to her, grasping at her insides, stealing her breath. Please, she whispered to herself, desperate for a way to turn back time, to hold on to what could never be held again. Then came the churning noise of hoses spraying water, trying to combat the inferno, but she knew it was futile. The fire raged on, mocking her, devouring not just her home, but the memories locked within its walls. All the laughter, the holiday dinners, the quiet evenings spent with her grandmother gone in a heartbeat. As the fire began to die down, the reality of her loss crashed over Clara like a tidal wave. She stood there numb, as her home transitioned from the bright, lively cottage it once was to a charred skeleton of wood. Nothing was left but remnants of destruction and the aching void where her heart used to be. It was then she noticed him, a tall figure approaching through the haze. It was Jake, the rancher who lived a few miles down the road, known for his kindness and quiet strength. He stood sturdy, grounded, his presence a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding them. He asked, his brow furrowed with concern as he reached her side. The noise of the sirens faded slightly, creating a small bubble of calm amidst the tumult. Clara could only shake her head, tears streaming down her face. Without hesitation, Jake took a breath and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone," he said softly. "Come with me." Gratitude washed over her, mixed with disbelief. Could she really accept help from someone she barely knew? Looking at the ruins of her life, she felt fear gnawing at her insides. "Okay," she said, voice trembling. As they drove toward the ranch, the weight of loss pressed heavy on her chest. Safely tucked inside Jake's truck, she stared out at the rapidly darkening sky, a canvas of swirling orange and purple far more beautiful and serene than what had just been. It felt surreal, being swept away from devastation into a realm of possibility, albeit fleeting. Jake filled the silence with stories about the ranch. He described the open fields and the animals, the way the world seemed to come alive with sounds and colors. Clara let his voice wash over her like a balm, momentarily distracting her from the heartache. Yet shadows lingered at the edges of her mind, reminding her of everything she had lost. When they arrived at the ranch, Clara noticed the wide expanse of land. The rolling hills, dotted with grazing cattle, stretched out infinitely, and the sweet smell of hay floated through the air. This place felt alive, and it breathed into her heavy heart with cautious hope. Jake led her to a cozy guest room, simple but welcoming. "You can stay as long as you need," he said, sincerity radiating from every word. Clara absorbed the warmth of the space, feeling the safety wrap around her like a comforting hug. That evening, Jake prepared dinner, his movements fluid and confident. He shared stories about his family and life on the ranch, making Clara laugh until her cheeks hurt. For just a moment she relaxed, forgetting the devastating loss. Conversations flowed easily between them, revealing parts of themselves they had kept hidden from the world. But as the days turned into weeks, morning sunlight began to seep into her life again. Jake was patient and kind, introducing her to the rhythms of ranch life. Clara learned to care for the animals, and the simple acts of feeding and cleaning brought her a sense of accomplishment. Every clucking chicken and soft neigh of a horse soothed her chaos, grounding her in the present. One afternoon, while brushing Daisy, the ranch's gentle mare, Clara found herself pouring out her heart to Jake. "I never thought losing my home would feel this strange," she admitted, her fingers working through Daisy's sleek mane. Jake stood beside her, listening intently. "Grief can feel like a storm," he said, resting a hand on her shoulder gently, "but it doesn't have to last forever." His words struck a chord within Clara, resonating deeply. In those moments, she began to understand that community and kindness could build bridges back to joy. Slowly, she immersed herself in the world outside, forming connections with neighbors and other ranchers, filling the isolation that had settled around her. Days grew longer, and the ranch flourished under the warm sun. Clara made a small garden beside the guest room, planting seeds of hope and new beginnings. She worked tirelessly, nurturing each plant as if she were cultivating her own spirit. As roots took hold in the ground, Clara felt her own roots beginning to grow, anchoring her back to life. The laughter of children playing nearby became a sweet soundtrack to her healing journey. Clara started to help out at community events, baking treats and sharing her story with others. With every smile she encountered, she felt the shards of her broken heart mirror the beauty of her garden. Then came the autumn festival, a lively celebration filled with laughter and music. Clara and Jake worked side by side, preparing food and decorations. The warmth of their friendship deepened amidst the vibrant colors of falling leaves. Clara noticed the way Jake's smile lit up when he caught her gaze. Unspoken words of comfort passed between them, weaving a bond she never anticipated. At the festival, Clara watched families come together under the glow of twinkling lights, their shared joy lighting up the night. But in the midst of it all, a shadow flickered across her heart. She felt a wave of longing reminding her that the loss she had encountered was never entirely erased. Still, the warmth of the community wrapped around her like a soft blanket. That night, as they carved pumpkins together, Jake turned to Clara, his expression serious yet warm. "You've shown so much strength," he said. "You've turned everything around." Clara felt the heat rise to her cheeks. "I couldn't have done it without you." Her voice faltered a moment. "Being here for you is thanks enough," Jake replied earnestly. "You found your strength, Clara. You just needed a little time and space." As autumn days melted into winter, Clara embraced the change of seasons, knowing her journey would not end with the first frost. Each morning brought new hope as she watched the golden sun rise and breathe life into the world around her. But even as the ranch pulsed with activity, Clara's heart carried shadows of her past. Memories would sneak in unexpectedly, and the ache of loss sometimes pressed heavy on her soul. One cool winter evening, she found herself alone outside, watching the snowflakes fall softly like whispers of the past. Jake emerged beside her, his presence warm against the biting cold. He asked gently, concern etched across his face. "Sometimes it feels harder than I expected," Clara admitted, the words pouring out before she could hold them back. Jake sighed, understanding the depth behind her words. "It's okay to feel that way. What you lost shaped who you are now." His words resonated strongly, and for a moment Clara felt a flicker of reassurance. "Thank you for always being here," she said, glancing up at him. That glance lingered just a second too long. Something unspoken shimmered in the air between them. In that hard moment of honesty, everything shifted. Clara realized she had found more than just shelter. Jake had become a guiding force in her life, someone who made her believe in love and hope again. Later that night, after the snow had settled in a thick blanket around the ranch, Clara made her way to the barn. She found Jake, his silhouette framed by soft lantern light. He had been working late, tending to the animals, but paused as she entered. "Hey," he said, warmth radiating from his voice. "I needed some time to think," Clara replied, biting her lip, courage building inside her chest. Jake asked, leaning against the barn door like he always did, unwavering and patient. Clara took a deep breath, the air sharp and tinged with possibility. "All this time I've been healing and growing. I never expected to feel this way about someone again." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment she feared he might not feel the same. But Jake stepped closer, and she saw it in his eyes, something deep, something raw, something incredibly beautiful. "I feel it too," he said softly. As the warmth flooded between them, Clara couldn't help but smile. In that moment, they both understood that life, even with its storms and fires, had a way of guiding hearts to places of unexpected refuge and warmth. They stood together, witnessing the dawning of a new chapter, just beginning a journey intertwined, filled with possibilities and future joys. As winter faded and spring returned, the world blossomed to life once again. Clara looked out across the ranch, vibrant flowers blooming across the fields, and she felt the embrace of both nature and love. This was home now, a place woven together with threads of resilience and kindness. The flames that had once taken her life away had paved the path to something beautiful, leading her to a greater understanding of love and community. She hadn't just found shelter in Jake, she'd also found a partner to journey through life with. With every sunrise, Clara realized that rebuilding could be more than a physical act. It was an emotional journey, a pathway lit with both memories and bright new beginnings. And amidst the beauty, Clara smiled, ready to embrace whatever came next. Together, hand in hand, they would face the future, hearts wide open and ready to receive the magic life still had to offer. The crackling sound of fire filled the air as Clara stood frozen, terror tightening its grip around her heart. She had been in the kitchen just moments before, preparing a simple dinner, the smell of garlic and herbs wafting through the warm evening air. Now, as she opened the back door to grab some fresh basil, she was met with an unbearable sight, flames leaping high from the roof of her small cottage. Clara's mind raced. It was just a house, but to her it was a sanctuary filled with laughter, love, and every precious memory she had built over the years. She quickly grabbed her phone and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "My house is on fire." Her voice broke, fear wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. Outside, panic surged through her veins as a thick plume of smoke curled up toward the sky. She could hear the distant wail of sirens, but it felt as though time itself had stopped. All she could think about was the life inside those walls. The family dinners, the quiet mornings on the porch, the late-night talks that lingered in the air like a soft melody. Each memory felt like a stab to her heart. In a blur, neighbors began to gather, eyes wide with concern, but Clara felt utterly alone, surrounded by people yet immersed in her grief. She whispered to herself as the flames danced with fierce delight, devouring the very essence of her existence. Finally, a fire truck roared onto her street, its red lights flickering through the haze. Firefighters poured out, urgency painted on their faces. They rushed toward her home, hoses in hand, but inside, Clara felt the battle was already lost. The fire claimed the roof in one fell swoop. She stood back, swallowing the lump in her throat, her world crumbling before her eyes. It seemed endless, the way it consumed everything. Minutes turned into an eternity as she watched her life burn to the ground. Just then, a familiar silhouette broke through the smoke, a tall, sturdy figure she recognized. It was Jake, the rancher from just down the road. Always quiet, always kind, Jake had a reputation as a solid man in the community. He hurried to her side. He asked, concern etched into his brow. His hat shaded his eyes, but she could see the worry in them. "No, I'm not," she said, her voice trembling. His expression softened. "You don't have to face this alone. Come back to the ranch with me." The genuine offer shocked her. She hardly knew him, yet here he was, extending a hand when her world felt like it was spiraling out of control. Clara glanced back at her home, now just a wreckage of charred wood and memories. What choice did she have? With a vulnerable nod, she agreed. "Okay," she said weakly, following him toward his truck. As they drove, silence filled the space between them, heavy and thick with unspoken words. Clara gazed out the window, watching the landscape blur in a whirlwind of greens and browns. For the first time, the endless expanse of rolling hills seemed inviting rather than confining. It felt strange, almost surreal. Was she really leaving everything behind? Jake broke the silence. "I have a few spare rooms," he began, his tone lightening. "It's not much, but it's home. You'll get used to the animals." A small part of Clara wanted to smile, to let humor trickle in through her anguish, but it felt too heavy inside. Her mind was still reeling, consumed by the flames that had swallowed her life whole. When they arrived at the ranch, Clara was met with the sight of sprawling pastures and a big red barn. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of hay and open fields. It felt like another world, a sanctuary where time moved differently. Jake showed her to a small guest room, simple but cozy, with sunlight streaming in through the window. It felt alien, yet warm enough to cradle her grief. "Make yourself at home," Jake said, his voice steady. Clara watched him walk away, grateful yet confused. How could someone she barely knew extend such kindness? She sank into the bed, looking around at the new surroundings. Glistening tears blurred her vision. She could hardly process the whirlwind of fear, loss, and the unexpected generosity of a stranger. That evening in the kitchen, Jake cooked a hearty meal. The fragrant aroma of roasted chicken and vegetables filled the air, wrapping Clara in a blanket of warmth. As they ate together, she felt the tension in her shoulders start to ease. Jake's stories about life on the ranch made her laugh, and soon, the burden of her loss floated just a little further away. Days turned into weeks, and gradually, Clara began to find her footing. Each morning, she awoke to the sounds of the ranch, the clucking of chickens, and the soft whine of horses. There was something inherently soothing about it, like a gentle reminder that life continued, even if hers had been temporarily shaken. Jake was patient, introducing her to his daily routines. He showed her how to feed the animals and mend fences. Broken as she felt inside, Clara found a certain comfort in rolling up her sleeves and working in the open air. There was a sense of purpose in tending to the animals, connecting with them, learning to help with all the tasks that made the ranch thrive. While walking through the fields one day, Clara felt a connection to the land she hadn't anticipated. The sky stretched endlessly above her, and the vastness wrapped around her like a tender embrace. She could breathe, really breathe, for the first time since the fire. One evening, gazing at the sunset, Clara shared her fears with Jake. "I thought I was strong," she said softly, "but losing my home." Jake listened, nodding. "It's okay to feel that way. There's no right way to grieve," he said gently. "What you went through takes time." His words hung in the air, and she felt the weight of them settling into her heart. He truly understood what she was grappling with, and for the first time, Clara saw him as more than just a rescuer. He was a friend, a constant, steady presence who grounded her. As winter approached and the first snow began to fall, Clara embraced the change in scenery. The ranch transformed into a sparkling wonderland, blanketed in white. There was a magic to the way the snow cushioned the world, muffling chaos and creating a sense of stillness. One chilly evening, as they bundled up by the fire, Clara marveled at how far she had come in such a short time. "I never expected to find peace again," she said, lifting her mug of cocoa. Jake turned toward her, and for a moment their eyes locked in a powerful gaze. "You've done this for yourself, Clara." But in the depths of her heart, Clara felt something unfurl, a flutter of newfound hope and affection. Jake had not just provided shelter from the storm, he had breathed life into her world, showing her that kindness could flourish even amidst tragedy. As snow-dusted days turned into the promise of spring, Clara and Jake found themselves growing closer. They worked side by side, sharing laughter, exchanging stories, and ultimately supporting each other. There was something unspoken between them, a connection that felt both thrilling and terrifying. One sun-kissed afternoon, Clara suggested they take a break from work and go for a ride on horseback. Jake agreed, and they hitched up a couple of gentle mares from the barn and set off into the rolling hills. The wind whipped through Clara's hair as the horses galloped through the vast landscape. It felt exhilarating, a rush of life that momentarily dulled the ache of loss. As they reached the top of a small hill, Clara took a moment to drink in the view. The colors of spring burgeoned around them, vibrant hues bursting forth, signaling renewal. Sitting there with the sun warming her skin, she realized that rebuilding didn't mean forgetting. It meant moving forward, carrying memories while welcoming new ones. Turning towards Jake, she found him gazing at her. She asked, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. I admire your strength," he said earnestly. Clara felt an undeniable spark as their eyes locked, and she realized that somewhere along her journey, she had not just found safety, she had unearthed a connection that felt deeper than friendship. "You've been my strength too," she admitted. Suddenly a weight hung in the air between them, an electricity that crackled like the embers in a fire. Clara took a breath, her heart pounding in anticipation. "I think I'm ready for the next chapter," she said, her voice steady but soft. Jake edged closer, his gaze steady as he brushed a wisp of hair from her face. In that moment she knew she had stepped through a door she never expected to find. The fear that gripped her heart began to dissolve. The fire may have taken her home, but it had also led her to a love that was genuine and real, a love rooted in understanding and compassion. As spring blossomed into summer, Clara worked to rebuild not just her life, but the pieces of herself that had felt so broken. Together with Jake, they poured their energy into a community garden, inviting neighbors to join in and grow their own fresh produce. Laughter echoed through the fields as they shared stories beneath the open sky. Every meeting became an opportunity to heal and connect, turning the pain of loss into something beautiful, a testament to resilience and new beginnings. Clara found comfort in the friendships blooming around her. Each seed planted a reminder of hope and renewal. One sun-drenched afternoon, while working side by side with Jake, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "You've changed my life," she said, turning to him, her heart full. "The truth is," he replied, his voice steady, "you changed it yourself. You have this incredible light, Clara." Those words filled Clara with warmth, igniting every dark corner of her heart. For so long she had centered herself around what she had lost, but now, surrounded by love and hope, she could see the dawn breaking with endless possibilities. As summer waned into autumn, Clara stood in front of a brand new community center they had built together. It wouldn't have existed without the bonds they forged in the aftermath of tragedy. People gathered around her, as familiar faces filled with smiles embraced the brand new space. Amidst laughter and joy, Clara stepped back, taking in the scene of life she had helped create, the garden flourishing, friendships blossoming. And right beside her was Jake, a steady figure who had been there through it all. He squeezed her hand, and in that moment she recognized that she was finally home, not only within these walls but in herself. Every day had been a step toward healing, showing her that the fire that took her life had forged something remarkable in its wake. Together, Clara and Jake faced the future with open hearts, ready to embrace every moment along the journey ahead. No longer was she defined by what she lost. Rather, Clara was reborn through resilience, strength, and an unyielding belief in the power of love. The flames licked at the edges of Clara's small home as she stood paralyzed on the front lawn, disbelief etched across her face. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow on the scene, and she could smell the acrid smoke curling into the evening air. Just hours before, she had sat in her cozy living room, oblivious to the danger creeping in from the dry brush nearby. Now her world was unraveling before her eyes. She had always loved that house, a quaint little cottage with white shutters lined with vibrant flowers. Memories bloomed inside those Walls family gatherings, quiet evenings with a book, the laughter of friends echoing through the rooms. And now it was all disappearing, consumed by the flames that crackled and roared, their sound mingling with the distant wail of sirens. Clara felt her knees go weak as the enormity of it all settled in. The question throbbed inside her mind like a hammer against an anvil. The fire had taken so much, her home, her memories, and a piece of her heart. This wasn't just brick and mortar, it was her life. As she gazed into the inferno, her phone vibrated in her pocket. With shaking hands, she fished it out and dialed 911. "My house is on fire." Her voice was barely more than a whisper, an echo of the storm raging in her chest. Before she could hang up, a voice on the other end replied, "Help is on the way." But how in that moment could anyone feel safe? As the firefighters arrived, red trucks roaring up the narrow street, Clara stood frozen with shock. Smoke billowed, obscuring her vision, yet she remained fixated on the flames, a part of her wanting to rush forward to somehow save what could not be saved. A group of neighbors assembled, worry etched across their faces, but they felt like strangers in a collapsing dream. Then Clara caught sight of a familiar silhouette. It was Jake, the rancher from down the road, known for his generous spirit and hard work. He rushed toward her, a steady presence in the chaos. His voice was calm, a lifeline in the storm of her emotions. My home, it's gone," she choked out, tears spilling down her cheeks. The shock was giving way to raw sorrow, a tidal wave crashing over her. "You don't have to face this alone," Jake said gently. "Come with me to the ranch." Clara hesitated, torn between her pride and the overwhelming dread of losing everything she had ever known. But as she glanced back at the inferno, that terrible specter of loss, she knew she had no choice. "Okay," she murmured, and without another word, she followed him to his truck. The drive to the ranch was a blur. Clara looked out the window, watching the landscape rush by, each mile pulling her further from her life. The weight of despair sat heavily on her chest. Jake broke the silence, filling the air with stories of his ranch, of horses that ran wild across the fields and cows that were a handful during calving season. His voice was like a balm, soothing her troubled heart just a little. "It's a big place," he said as they pulled into the ranch. "Lots of room, lots of animals." The ranch was expansive, a sprawling vista of rolling fields and grazing cattle. Clara took a deep breath, the earthy scent of the land swirling around her, mixed with the crispness of the evening air. It felt strange to be here, to step into a new life so suddenly. Jake led her to a modest guest room filled with rustic charm. It wasn't much, but it felt like a refuge. "Make yourself at home," he said, stepping back to give her space, but Clara felt anything but at home. As she sank onto the bed, the reality hit her like a cold wave. Her personal belongings, her memories, her security, everything had been reduced to ashes. She looked around the unfamiliar room, a mixture of fear and gratitude flooding her senses. What was she going to do? That evening, Jake offered to cook dinner, and Clara watched as he moved around the kitchen with ease. He hummed softly to himself, stirring pots and chopping vegetables. She was surprised how comforting it felt to share a meal in the warm glow of the kitchen, the gentle clinks of silverware creating a soft melody in the air. Over dinner, their conversation flowed more easily. "You're a good cook," Clara remarked, surprised at how nice it felt to smile, even for a brief moment. "Just survival skills," Jake replied with a modest grin. As the days turned into weeks, Clara felt bits of her strength returning. Each dawn brought new rhythms, the sounds of roosters crowing and horses neighing filling the air like a morning symphony. Jake gradually introduced her to life on the ranch. Together, they tended to the animals, mended fences, and even laughed when things went hilariously wrong. Clara found that hard work in the fresh air soothed her heart, much like when she tended her garden back home. Little by little, she began to heal. There was something about the animals. Each horse, cow, and chicken had their own personality, and they provided an unexpected sense of connection. She felt as if they were continuing to teach her, to pull her out of the dark abyss where she had been lost. One evening, as they were cleaning up after a long day, Clara mustered the courage to open her heart to Jake. "Thank you for everything," she said, brushing her hands on her jeans. Jake paused and turned to her, sincerity in his eyes. "You've been through so much. You're stronger than you realize," he replied, "and you're not alone anymore." For the first time since the fire, Clara felt a flicker of hope dance in her chest. The vulnerability hung between them like a delicate thread, ready to be woven into something more. As the months passed, the warmth of spring blossomed into a vibrant summer, and with it, a newfound friendship between Clara and Jake deepened into something more profound. They spent evenings together in the garden, planting flowers and vegetables side by side, each moment a step toward healing. They shared stories, laughter, and the occasional comfortable silence. Their bond was so natural, so easy, it felt as if it had always been there, nestled beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Clara found herself smiling more often, allowing the laughter to bloom where sadness had once thrived. Clara even began helping Jake with the dreams he had for the ranch. She shared her own ideas, and together they built a vision for a community garden where neighbors could come together and grow their own food. But even amidst the joy, shadows of her past occasionally crept in. There were moments when the ache of what she had lost pierced through the happy illusions like a dagger. One evening while she was planting seeds in the garden, Clara found herself staring blankly at the soil, memories flooding back of her grandmother teaching her the same thing years ago. The warmth of those memories was replaced by the chill of loss, and she felt tears prick her eyes. Jake's voice pulled her back to the present, concern thick in the air around them. "It's just, sometimes I miss home so much," Clara admitted, the words tumbling out. Jake crouched down beside her, taking a moment before he spoke. "Home isn't just a place, it's what you make of the people around you. You've created a new home here." His words washed over her with warmth. She considered his understanding, realizing he was right. The ranch, with its rolling hills and vivid sunsets, was a sanctuary she had never thought she needed. As summer turned to fall, Clara decided to throw a small harvest celebration for the community, an idea she shared with Jake, who eagerly helped her organize it. They transformed the ranch into a hub of activity, inviting neighbors and friends to join in on the festivities. The day of the celebration, laughter rang out as children chased each other around the yard, while adults gathered to share food and stories. Clara felt her heart swell with joy as she watched Jake leading games, his voice booming with laughter, his eyes crinkling in delight. Standing among the blooming flowers she had planted with care, Clara felt a newfound sense of belonging, a mosaic of moments stitched together with kindness and love. The realization dug deep into her heart. While the fire had consumed her past, it had also paved the way for a new kind of life, rich with possibilities. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, Clara found Jake sitting on the porch, enjoying the fading light. "Hey," he said, looking up at her with a warm smile. "Thanks to you, I couldn't have done it without your help," Clara replied softly, taking a seat beside him. "It's funny how things turn out." Jake turned to her, his expression growing serious. Life has its own way of leading us to unexpected places. Their eyes locked, and in that moment Clara felt a surge of emotion, something deeper than friendship flickering just beneath the surface. "I'm really grateful for you, Jake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clara," he started, his voice low and steady, "I care about you." A warmth spread through Clara's chest, and just like that, the distance between them evaporated. The words flowed easily, truth spilling from her heart. As they shared that moment, the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, a perfect backdrop to their newfound connection. They leaned closer, breaths mingling in the cool evening air, time stretching like a silken thread between them. The first touch of Jake's hand on Clara's felt electric, igniting everything inside her. That fragile moment, fear and hope intertwined, reminding them both that healing comes in many forms and love can sprout from the ashes. Months passed and Clara flourished alongside the ranch. The garden grew lush with life, and in the same way her heart expanded, filled with companionship and purpose. Together, she and Jake nurtured the land and each other, finding joy in the small moments, reminiscing over coffee at dawn, exploring the endless fields, and sharing quiet evenings beneath the starry skies. The fire that took her home once felt like an end, but it had morphed into a beginning. The ranch had welcomed her, and in its embrace she found not just shelter, but a new definition of family. As the seasons changed again, Clara stepped forward, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead, her heart brimming with strength and hope. Jake's hand entwined with hers as they looked out over the open fields together. In that moment, Clara knew they were ready for anything. Together, they would face whatever life held, built on the ashes of the past, stronger, braver, and more alive than ever before. The future stretched ahead like an open road, each curve revealing new adventures waiting to unfold. She would not just survive, she would thrive in this new chapter of life, side by side with the man who had given her shelter when she needed it most. The flames danced in the dusk like ravenous spirits, flickering high above the roofs, while Clara stood frozen in shock on her front porch. Her little cottage, once filled with laughter and warmth, was now succumbing to the fiery grip of destruction. She could only watch as the inferno swallowed it whole, sending up a plume of black smoke that twisted into the starry night sky. "Not like this," she whispered, feeling her heart race wildly, panic clawing at the edges of her mind. The smell of burning wood reached her, and memories of family dinners, warm holiday gatherings, and quiet mornings spent with her grandmother flooded her thoughts. All those moments now reduced to embers. Clara scrambled for her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed 911. "My house is on fire." The words felt small and helpless, swallowed by the crackling flames that roared defiantly. In the distance, she could hear the wail of sirens approaching, but they felt like the faint whisper of a world no longer connected to hers. As she stood there, surrounded by the frantic commotion of her neighbors and the fire brigade arriving, the realization hit her like a freight train. She didn't know where to go. Panic bubbled within her, each breath feeling heavier than the last. Just then, a familiar figure broke through the throng of firefighters and onlookers. It was Jake, the rancher from down the road, with his broad shoulders and steady presence. He rushed toward Clara, his eyes scanning her face for signs of distress. Clara, he asked, clearly shaken. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. No, my home, it's gone. Listen to me, Jake said firmly, placing a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to face this alone. Come with me to the ranch. The weight of his words struck her. He was offering her a lifeline, but Clara hesitated. She had always prided herself on being independent, but looking back at the destruction, she felt hollow and lost. Okay, she finally breathed, nodding gently. She followed him to his truck, leaving behind the remnants of her life. The drive felt surreal, the landscape racing by in a blur as Clara gazed out the window. The sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows that mirrored the emptiness in her heart. She could barely process the storm of emotions swirling inside her: rage, sadness, fear, but there was a flicker of gratitude that Jake was by her side. When they pulled into the ranch, the vastness struck her. The wide-open fields stretched out before them, illuminated by the last rays of the sun. The air smelled fresh, a mix of earth, hay, and something that felt like possibilities. Clara felt both comforted and terrified, stepping into an unfamiliar world. Jake led her to a guest room, simple yet cozy. It had a small bed with a handmade quilt, a window overlooking the fields, but her heart ached for her lost home. She sank onto the bed, feeling like a ghost in someone else's life. "I'll fix you something to eat," Jake said, his voice softening. As he moved around the kitchen, Clara noticed how at ease he was. Even in the chaos of her life, he seemed to find calmness in the everyday rhythm of ranch life. This was his home, a sanctuary that had withstood its own storms, and she was crashing into it like a sudden gust of wind. Dinner was a simple affair, the warmth from the kitchen wrapping around her like a soft blanket. Jake served her a hearty stew, its aroma filling the air with comfort. For the first time in hours, she found herself laughing at his stories about the quirky animals on the ranch. Clara felt a smile tug at her lips, grateful for the distraction. She listened closely, finding solace in the way his voice flowed, painting vivid images of life on the ranch. Here, amid the laughter, she began to peel away layers of despair, if only a little. Days turned into weeks, and Clara settled into the daily routines of ranch life. It was a world both foreign and inviting. Jake taught her how to ride horses, how to care for the chickens, and even how to plant a garden. Each small task gave her a sense of purpose, a thread of normalcy weaving its way back into her life. One day, under the vast blue sky, Clara found herself brushing a horse named Daisy, her heart lightening as she connected with the gentle creature. "You know, I used to have a garden like this at my old home," she shared with Jake as they worked together. "Sounds like she was quite the gardener," Jake replied, his eyes warm. His praise filled her with hope. The sun shone down, and Clara felt the warmth seep into her bones. Each moment on the ranch rejuvenated her spirit, and for the first time since the fire, she felt a flicker of intent within her, a spark of resilience igniting in the depths of her soul. But the nights held shadows. Sometimes she would lie awake in bed, listening to the distant sounds of the ranch, while memories of her lost home swirled through her mind. There were moments the ache felt insurmountable, but in the mornings she would rise and meet Jake at sunrise, and the world felt lighter again. One evening, while digging in the garden, Clara's thoughts drifted back to the fire. "Sometimes I can't escape it," she admitted, looking down at the earth beneath her fingers. "I think about my home," and Jake set down his trowel, his expression serious. "Grief can feel like a storm. It can wash over you when you least expect it. It's okay to feel that way." His calm demeanor provided a sense of healing she didn't know she needed. "I feel like I'm carrying it inside me, like a weight I can't shake off," she confessed. "You'll learn to carry it with you, not against you," he reassured her. "You're building something new here, Clara." Jake's words lingered in the air between them, filling the space with understanding. Together, they planted seeds in the garden, something new, a testament to new beginnings. As autumn approached, the leaves turned brilliant shades of orange and gold, and Clara found herself at the zenith of her healing journey. She was no longer just existing, she was living. The ranch felt like home, bursting with life and color. Nearby neighbors visited often, and she began to form connections, expanding her new family amidst the fields. In the spirit of gratitude, Clara planned a harvest celebration at the ranch, hoping to connect more deeply with her community. She and Jake worked tirelessly to prepare, turning the barn into a vibrant hub filled with laughter and anticipation. On the day of the celebration, the sun beamed brightly, illuminating the fields with warmth. Children ran around, shrieking with laughter as adults gathered to share food and stories. Clara busily poured her heart into preparing a feast, dimensional with dishes that honored her grandmother's traditions. As she watched the festivities unfold, joy surged through Clara like a cascading wave. The air was thick with happiness, and for a moment she could almost forget the shadow of loss. She saw Jake mingling with the guests, his easy laughter echoing back to her. In that instant, she realized how far she'd come, not just in distance, but in spirit. Later, amidst all the bustling energy, Clara found Jake standing by the barn, staring out over the fields. "You did an amazing job today," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "Thank you," she replied, her heart warm. Jake hesitated, the air thickening between them, woven with tension. "You make it easy to support you." Clara felt her pulse quicken. Could this be more than friendship? She had shared so many moments of vulnerability with him, and they had built something meaningful together. Jake, she started, her voice trembling, I just wanted you to know how much I care about you, Clara, he said, stepping closer. You've brought life back to this ranch in ways I never thought possible. The world around them fell away as they locked eyes. It was a moment charged with possibility, the air thick with unspoken promises. And in that light, Clara no longer felt like a survivor of the fire. She began to see herself as someone who could thrive. Months passed and the seasons turned once again. Spring arrived and everything bloomed with fresh vitality, including Clara's hope. She worked side by side with Jake, moving forward from the ashes of her past into something real and bright. In the warmth of the setting sun, they began to share more intimate moments, quiet dinners, long walks, and deep conversations under the stars. Clara cherished each moment, feeling as if her heart were blossoming again after being buried under layers of pain. One evening, while watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Jake turned to her. He asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Clara paused, searching her heart. I see possibility. I see love and laughter. I see our garden flourishing and more community events. Jake smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling warmly. As spring melted into summer, Clara took another step forward, embracing a vision for herself and for the ranch. Together with Jake, they worked to establish a community garden, inviting neighbors to help sow seeds of connection and nourishment. The garden blossomed not just with flowers, but with friendships as they turned the ground into something beautiful and bountiful, a reflection of their shared vision. Clara felt that every seed they planted was another layer of healing, another step towards building a life she could call her own. One evening beneath the flickering stars, Clara and Jake sat on the porch swing, the soft sounds of night wrapping around them. You have no idea how much this place means to me, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake took her hand in his, warmth radiating between them. You gave life back to me too, Clara. In that moment, as they looked deeply into each other's eyes, Clara knew their connection was something extraordinary. Together they healed, and together they faced the future unafraid. Through the turbulent waves of loss and rebirth, Clara had learned to embrace every moment. As they watched the stars twinkle like distant promises, she realized that every piece of her journey had led her here, to a place of love, strength, and endless possibilities. With Jake by her side, her heart filled with the knowledge that she would not just survive, but thrive in the new life she had built from the ashes of the old. And in that beautiful realization, Clara knew they were just getting started. The future was theirs to create, a canvas painted with hope, resilience, and love that would shine brightly against the backdrop of their extraordinary story. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon when Clara first noticed the smoke. Rolled ominously against the vivid orange sky, a dark plume rising from the direction of her home. At first she thought it was a neighbor's weekend barbecue, but as the scent of burning wood filled the air, dread stitched its way through her heart. Not again, she murmured, racing to the front of her property. Her cottage, a small haven tucked away behind a line of trees, stood vulnerable against the encroaching blaze. The flames crackled and roared, a wild and untamed force consuming everything in its path. Clara grabbed her phone, hands shaking, as she dialed 911. Please hurry, panic echoed in her voice, the words feeling small and helpless against the roar of the inferno. As she spoke, she could see the firemen arriving in the distance, their sirens wailing like banshees, but the fear in her chest only grew. By the time the firefighters began to battle the flames, Clara felt as though she were in a surreal nightmare. She stood at the edge of her yard, watching the life she had built go up in smoke. Memories flashed through her mind like a slideshow. Family dinners, Christmas mornings, and evenings spent reading in the warmth of her living room. All gone, a flicker of remembrance snuffed out like a candle. Panic clawed at her throat. She whispered, feeling rooted to the ground as if the very earth beneath her feet were crumbling away. The fire illuminated her face, the flickering light casting wild shadows as she fought to process the reality of her loss. Then out of the chaos she spotted him, Jake, the rancher from down the road. He came charging through the throng of firefighters, his presence a solid anchor amidst the storm. Strong and steady, Jake had a reputation in town for being kind, always ready to lend a hand. He called out as he approached, concern etched on his face. She looked up at him, overwhelmed. No. Her voice cracked, the weight of reality crashing down upon her. She felt stripped bare, utterly exposed. Jake's expression softened. You don't have to handle this alone, come with me to the ranch. The offer caught her by surprise. Clara hesitated, staring back at the flames that danced triumphantly against the evening sky. Could she really accept help from someone she barely knew? But standing in the ashes of her former life, desperation brewed a strong resolve within her. Okay, she finally said, grasping at the lifeline he extended. As they drove away from her cottage, the world became a blur beyond the window. Each mile felt heavy, a weight pressing on her chest. It was hard to grasp the shift from her home to a stranger's ranch. The chatter of emotions inside her head felt chaotic, but Jake's voice broke through, weaving stories of life on the ranch about the horses, the fields, and the endless tasks that awaited them. She tried to focus on his words, feeling a flicker of warmth amidst the overwhelming darkness. "You'll find a lot of good work to do, and the animals can be a handful, but they make for great company," Jake said in an attempt to lighten the mood. When they arrived at the ranch, Clara was struck by the vastness of it all. The sprawling fields and the distant silhouette of the barn painted a picturesque scene. The air was filled with the earthy scent of grass and hay, a stark contrast to the smoke and ash that clung to her memory like a shroud. Jake led her to a guest room, simple yet welcoming. It was furnished with handmade wood pieces and a quilt that felt warm against her fingertips. "Make yourself at home," he said, stepping back to give her some space. "I'll bring you something to eat in a bit," he added before walking out. Clara sank onto the bed, her heart heavy with loss. The silence enveloped her, a stark reminder of what had just been taken away. Alone in the room, she felt the tears start to fall once again. As the evening wore on, Jake returned with a hot meal, the aroma mingling with the freshness of the ranch air. They sat together at the small kitchen table, candles flickering softly. The food was simple but nourishing, and for the first time in a long while, Clara felt a sense of comfort. "Thank you for this," she said, gratefully. Jake smiled, his easy demeanor tempering the tension that hung thick in the air. "You're stronger than you think, Clara." They talked through the night, sharing stories about their lives, the quirky things that came with ranch life, and the small joys that made each day a little brighter. Clara found herself laughing more than she had in weeks, forgetting, even if just for a moment, the disaster that had just unfolded. The following days turned into a routine. Clara began to help with the chores on the ranch. Jake was patient and showed her how to care for the horses, how to feed the animals, and how rewarding it felt to work alongside them. Each chore became a way for her to connect with the world again, pulling her out of the darkness where she had been trapped. At first, every laugh felt foreign, a reminder of the joy she had lost. But slowly, Clara found solace in the rhythm of ranch life. The horses whinnied and snorted, the chickens clucked and scratched at the dirt, and the sun rose golden and bright over the hills each day. With every breath, she felt more alive. One afternoon, while brushing the sleek coat of a mare named Daisy, Clara shared a memory with Jake. "I used to have a garden back home," she said, her fingers moving gently along Daisy's mane. Jake listened intently as she spoke, the warmth of the sun bathing them in golden light. "Sounds like she was quite the gardener," he replied. "We could start a garden here too, if you'd like." A smile broke across Clara's face, and she felt a spark ignite within her. The idea of planting something new filled her with joy. It was a chance to create again something positive amidst the wreckage, so they set to work. With each seed they planted, Clara felt like she was sewing together the pieces of herself that had been frayed by loss. The garden became a sanctuary, a nurturing place where she felt life bloom around her. As summer heated the days, Clara and Jake found themselves spending more time together, their bond deepening. They shared laughter, stories, and quiet moments beneath the starlit sky, often sitting on the porch swing that creaked gently in the warm breeze. One night, while watching the stars, Clara turned to Jake. "You've shown me kindness when I thought no one would." Jake met her gaze, his expression serious. "I'm not going anywhere, Clara. You're a part of the ranch now, and you're a part of my life." The air was thick with unspoken words, each beat of her heart echoing the weight of the moment. Clara felt something shift within her. It was as if the walls she had put up around her heart began to crack. Maybe it was time to let the light in, to embrace this new chapter of her life. But as summer faded and autumn approached, Clara's past began to creep back in, uninvited. Some nights, memories of her home would ambush her as she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. There were moments when the sense of loss threatened to drown her under its heavy weight. One chilly evening, while watching the leaves fall from the trees, Clara felt a familiar wave of sadness wash over her. She stepped outside, needing to breathe, feeling the weight of grief anchor her. Jake noticed her lingering at the edge of the garden and walked over to her, concerned. He asked softly, Sometimes the memories feel too much," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's okay to feel that way. Just remember, you're not alone in this. You can share those memories with me." Clara looked into his eyes, feeling the warmth radiate from him. "You've shared so much of your life with me." With time, she began to open up. Would sit together under the stars, sharing stories that ripped at the fabric of her heart but slowly patched it back together. With every memory narrated, each laugh shared about life on the ranch, Clara began to feel lighter. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, Clara's heart began to mend. She found strength in vulnerability, in the friendship that had blossomed into something deeper. The garden continued to bloom, a vivid tapestry of colors that spoke of new beginnings and resilience. Then came a night that felt charged with possibility. Clara found herself drawn to Jake, comforted by his presence as they stood together in the garden, the moon casting a silvery glow over everything. "Clara," Jake said softly, turning to face her, "I need you to know my life has changed since you came into it." The vulnerability in his voice made her heart race. "You have no idea how much that means to me," she replied, meeting his gaze. Slowly, as if time itself held its breath, Jake moved closer. The tension hung in the air, electric and undeniable. I don't want to just be friends anymore, he confessed, his voice trembling slightly. Her heart surged with emotion. Neither do I, she breathed, stepping closer until their faces were almost touching. In that moment, everything shifted. It was as if the fire that had once burned her down had forged a new connection amidst the ashes. The world fell away, leaving just the two of them, two souls, connected and intertwined. Jake leaned in, his lips brushing against hers gently, as if testing the waters. Clara felt the warmth of his kiss spread through her, igniting every part of her being. In that kiss, she found the promise of healing, a connection that transformed the wounds of the past into something beautiful. As autumn descended and winter approached, Clara and Jake built a new life together. The ranch became a home not just for her, but for them both. And as they took each step forward together, she realized that the fire that had taken her home had paved the way for a new beginning, one filled with hope, laughter, and love. In the years that followed, Clara and Jake nurtured the garden they had planted, sharing not just crops but dreams. They held community events, inviting neighbors to their home, turning it into a sanctuary for everyone who had faced struggles. Their love blossomed alongside the flowers, a vibrant testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Clara understood now that life was not about what had been lost, but about what could be built anew. And surrounded by the laughter of friends, the vibrant colors of their garden, and the love that filled her heart, she finally felt at home once more. In the embrace of a rancher who had given her shelter, Clara had found a future alive with possibilities, ready to greet whatever came next. The flames roared hungrily, licking at the wooden beams of Clara's home as she stumbled onto the front porch, her heart pounding violently in her chest. Smoke curled into the sky, darkening the bright blue of her once peaceful neighborhood. It had started as a small flicker, an innocent spark igniting a chain reaction that spiraled out of control. Now her world was engulfed in chaos. Clara gasped, her voice barely a whisper, lost amidst the crackling fire. The heat was overwhelming, making her skin tingle uncomfortably. Her eyes brimmed with tears as the realization hit her. Everything she had built was slipping away, replaced by an unyielding inferno. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone, desperately dialing 911. My house is on fire. As she spoke, the fear surged within her, mixing with disbelief and sorrow. She could hear the distant wail of sirens, but it felt like a distant echo, a sound from someone else's life. Neighbors began to gather, their faces twisted in concern, but Clara felt utterly alone. She stood there, rooted to the spot, a spectator in a tragic play unfolding before her. Memories flashed in her mind like a slideshow: family gatherings, quiet nights with a book, the soft laughter of friends. Now every cherished memory was being swallowed whole by the flames. Suddenly she saw him, a familiar figure racing through the crowd. It was Jake, the rancher who lived just down the road. Known for his kindness and strong build, he was a man who always seemed to have a comforting presence in the chaotic world around him. He called out, his eyes wide with concern as he reached her side. His voice cut through the noise, a lifeline anchoring her as she floundered. No, Clara whispered, her voice trembling. Jake barely hesitated, his determination clear. You don't have to face this alone, come with me to the ranch. The offer surprised her. She had always valued her independence, her strength, but standing there, staring back at the flames consuming her life, she knew she needed help. Okay, she finally said, her heart pounding, and she followed him to his truck, leaving everything she knew behind. As they drove away, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the land. Clara gazed out the window, watching her former life fade away. Jake filled the silence with stories about the ranch, of the animals, the crops, and the rhythms of country life. It felt surreal, like stepping into a different world. When they arrived at the ranch, Jake showed her around. The vast fields stretched out before her, a wild mix of untamed beauty. Clara took a deep breath, the fresh air filling her lungs, but it couldn't chase away the heavy weight of loss still gripping her heart. He led her to a guest room, small yet inviting, filled with rustic charm. It was far from the home she had known, but in the moment it felt like a sanctuary. Make yourself at home, Jake said, his voice warm and reassuring. Clara sank onto the bed, tears pooling in her eyes as the reality of her situation crashed over her. She felt displaced, a wanderer in a life that was no longer hers. How would she ever regain control? That first night was long and restless. Lying in a strange room, the shadows cast by the moon danced across the walls, but sleep eluded her. Memories tormented her, whispering reminders of everything she had lost. Days passed, and slowly, Clara became accustomed to life at the ranch. Jake introduced her to the daily rhythms of the farm, feeding animals, watering crops, and even mucking stalls. Each task, while exhausting, began to knit her back together, piece by piece. She woke to the sound of roosters crowing, the scent of fresh hay mingling with the crisp morning air. One sunny afternoon, Clara found herself brushing a horse named Daisy, the gentle mare nudging her affectionately. "What a sweetheart you are," Clara said with a smile, her voice soft and soothing. It was moments like this that brought her solace, the simple connection to another living being. Jake watched from a distance, his smile mirroring hers. "You've got a natural way with them," he said, stepping closer, pride evident in his voice. Clara met his gaze, warmth flooding her chest. Thank you. I never thought I'd find comfort like this again. Their time spent together grew into a friendship, a refuge from their burdens. Clara learned not just about the ranch, but also about Jake. He shared stories of his childhood, of working on the land while tending to his family's cattle, and the pride that came from hard labor. Yet even amidst the laughter, shadows of her past lingered. Some nights, while watching the stars speckle the sky, Clara would feel the ache in her heart. The loss of her home would reach out, catching her off guard. It gnawed at her, a reminder of her vulnerability. One evening, as they sat outside on the porch swing, Clara turned to Jake, her heart heavy. I miss my home sometimes, you know. Of course you do, Jake replied, the warmth of his hand resting loosely on her back. Grief is a tricky thing. His words resonated with her, a reminder that it was okay to feel. I thought I was stronger than this, she admitted, her voice shaking ever so slightly. You're stronger than you know, he said softly, his eyes penetrating her heart. In those moments, Clara felt seen. Slowly, she began to open up to Jake, sharing her fears and the weight of her memories. Each confession lightened the burden she had carried alone for far too long. As autumn set in, the leaves began to change, ushering in a vibrant tapestry of colors around the ranch. Clara helped Jake harvest vegetables and plant new rows for the upcoming winter. There was something beautiful about tending to the earth, the way it responded to their labor, growing and thriving just as she was. But beneath the beauty, the shadows still crept in, whispering doubts. One afternoon, as she knelt in the dirt, Clara heard a chilling sound, the crackling of fire. Instantly, her heart raced, panic swelling within her like flames licking at her throat. She shouted, their earlier laughter fading away as the panic enveloped her. Jake was at her side in an instant. He asked, eyes wide with concern. It's the fire, Clara gasped, her voice trembling. Jake put a firm hand on her shoulder, grounding her. Breathe, Clara, it's okay, we've got this. They rushed toward the sounds, the fear racing in tandem with their footsteps. They could see thick smoke rising in the distance, curling ominously against the clear sky. It seemed like the world was spinning around them as they neared the source. When they arrived, Clara's heart sank. A small outbuilding was ablaze, flames licking hungrily at the wooden structure. Firefighters were already there, battling the flames with hoses, but Clara felt her knees weaken. Each crackle echoed in her mind, a reminder that danger lurked just beyond their grasp. Before she knew it, Jake had pulled her closer, shielding her from the heat. Stay close to me, he said, his voice a calm anchor amidst the storm. Clara asked, the uncertainty dripping from her lips. I don't know, he admitted candidly, but his eyes held a fierce determination. Watching the firefighters give their all, Clara felt a swell of gratitude towards Jake. His presence steadied her, a promise that she wouldn't face this on her own. They stood side by side, fingers intertwined, as they watched the battle unfold. Finally, with a triumphant cheer from the brave firefighters, the flames were extinguished. Exhausted yet relieved, Clara turned to Jake. I'm sorry for being such a mess, she confessed. You're human, Clara, he replied, his voice full of understanding. It's okay to feel scared, just remember you have a community around you now. As night fell and a blanket of stars draped the sky, Clara felt a renewal in her spirit. The frightening reality of the fire had rekindled something deep within her, a fierce determination to stand tall against whatever life threw her way. She was finally ready to confront her past and embrace the present. Weeks passed, and Clara found strength she hadn't known existed. The community rallied around the ranch, bringing food and support. Clara felt the bond of their shared struggles, forming a tapestry of resilience that wrapped around her heart. But as winter approached, Clara faced another turning point. One night, while chopping vegetables in the warm glow of the kitchen, she overheard Jake talking to one of his friends on the phone. Her heart raced as she continued to listen. Thoughts raced through her mind. Settling, was that what Jake wanted? Clara had never explicitly defined their relationship, but the thought of him wanting to move on without her felt like a dagger in her chest. Later that evening, as they sat outside, the chill creeping in, she turned to Jake, her voice faltering. Jake took a moment. I want to expand the ranch, maybe have some more animals. And Clara hesitated, unsure how to voice her fears. He asked, prompting her gently, I don't want to be a temporary stop for you, she admitted, the cracks in her voice betraying her vulnerability. Jake shifted closer, his expression serious. You're not, you're everything to me, Clara. What we've built here is real. The sincerity in his voice anchored her, but she wondered if they were truly on the same path. His eyes locked onto hers, emotions simmering. Clara, let's not rush. We've both been through flames, and I want to build something lasting. That night, Clara lay awake, the weight of uncertainty pressing heavily on her. Could she embrace a future when her past threatened to haunt her? Would it even be possible to open her heart fully again? The next morning, as she stood in the garden, surrounded by the vibrant plants they had nurtured together, she realized something had to give. It was time to confront her fears once and for all, to break the cycle of uncertainty that gripped her tightly. With the sun rising behind her, she took a deep breath. Courage filled her heart as she decided to voice her feelings more openly, no longer hiding behind the shadows of doubt. That evening, as the town gathered in the warmth of the ranch house, Clara pulled Jake aside. She asked, her voice steady. Of course, he replied, concern weaving through his tone. As they stepped outside into the crisp night air, Clara felt the chill seep into her bones. This conversation was going to change everything. I need to know where we stand. Jake's brow furrowed, his gaze intense. I want us to be on the same path, Jake. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but before he could find the words, a sudden loud commotion erupted from the party inside. Shouting echoed in the night as the front door burst open and a group of frantic people rushed out, their faces pale with fear. One neighbor cried, pointing toward the barn. Clara and Jake turned in horror, their hearts dropping. Not again, she whispered, dread pooling in her stomach. Jake's eyes met hers, filled with urgency. Stay here, he shouted as he sprinted towards the barn. As Clara stood frozen, a vortex of emotions whirling around her, she realized this moment, the uncertainty, the fear, and the fire would define everything. Would they rise together from the smoke and shadows, or would this disaster tear them apart once and for all? The flames flared up again, but this time Clara wasn't just a spectator. Something ignited within her, and she rushed after Jake, ready to face the fire alongside him, ready to confront everything she had held back. The night was dark, but Clara felt a fierce light begin to burn inside her, illuminating the path ahead, a path filled with courage, love, and the determination to build anew.